I want to bring in my political panel, former chief strategist for the Bush-Cheney 2004 presidential campaign, Matt Dowd, and CEO and co-founder of All In Together, Lauren Leder. Thank you both. Laura, let me go to you first. As an organizer, how much impact do mass protests like this have when it comes to galvanizing voters? And how do Democrats continue to seize that momentum?
Yeah, and Rev, I do think it's important, first of all, happy Easter to you. And I do think it's important that Democrats have this kind of outlet to protest, to organize, to motivate. But, you know, I've had some concerns about the protests. They have not been as diverse or as inclusive as I think some protests have been in the past. Some of our friends, yours and mine, have been writing about the ways in which African Americans have been sort of sitting on the sidelines and not participating in a lot of the protests that have been happening. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. It's really important that these be big tent coalition kind of movements. But at the same time, look, Americans are incredibly frustrated. And when their members of Congress are not turning out for town halls, as many Republicans are refusing to do, when there is a general sense that the administration is not listening to them, that members of Congress, especially on the Republican side, are not listening, you know, they absolutely have a right to protest and to turn out, to express their frustration. And I think at some point, if it continues, it will have more meaningful impact on public opinion, which is what the whole point of protest is to move the public.
Now, Matt, on the flip side, it's been another week of chaos and back and forth between the Trump administration and the courts. After defying a Supreme Court order and a federal judge's order to facilitate returning Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. after being wrongfully deported to El Salvador, a federal appeals court has denied Trump's request to delay things further, saying Trump's DOJ would reduce the rule of law to lawlessness. So is it at all a distraction tactic, or is there a genuine threat to the rule of law that more of Donald Trump is pushing back?
Well, there's already a direct threat to the rule of law, as the practice of what he's done has demonstrated. And as your earlier panel noted, this is not just about somebody without papers. This is about average Americans that could be, as of today on Easter, could be yanked out of their church or their temple or their mosque and put on a bus and then put on a plane and sent to El Salvador in the midst of this. I mean, I think we're already in a constitutional crisis because the Supreme Court and courts have ordered him to be brought back. He's not been brought back. The Trump administration refuses to bring him back, even to go through any kind of due process case. So we're already at the crisis point. I don't know how this gets resolved, except maybe a private plane goes there, gets him, brings him back, in some way talks the president of El Salvador out of it, who doesn't seem willing to oblige by the rule of law either. I mean, that's the situation we're in. A court has already told him to do this, and he's refused to do it. And as I said earlier, this is just one step. The next step is U.S. citizens being taken out of their homes or churches and sent to El Salvador.
Which Trump has alluded to he may want to do. Matt, let me follow that up. What is the administration's strategy when it comes to doubling down on not bringing Abrego Garcia home? Is it a test for how far they can push its use of the Alien Enemies Act going forward? Is that the strategy?
Well, I make Donald Trump akin to a reckless bus driver who it doesn't really have a plan, but then starts down the street and swerving into cars and all that, and somehow tries to convince the passengers he knows what he's doing. I don't think Donald Trump fully has some strategic plan here. I do think he tests all bounds of our institutions and constitutions and norms. He's done that. He did that in his previous 4 years. He's doing it more so now, today, as we watch this unfold in this. I think this is partially symbolic. I always assumed Donald Trump would give up on the idea of deporting 12 million undocumented people in this country. I never thought he would do that, because I think every single corporation community would rise rise up against him because we couldn't function as a country without it. So what I think he does is he symbolically picks something, knowing full well he can't do what he promised, and then rallies everybody to talk about this one single thing. I think if there's any plan, but again, that's probably it. But I do think he's a reckless bus driver, endangering all the passengers on board.
Lauren, higher education is now in Donald Trump's firing line, particularly elite universities like Harvard and Columbia. The administration has already frozen billions in federal funding for Harvard after the university refused to give into a list of demands and reforms from the White House. Trump is also threatening Harvard's tax-exempt status. Do you see others bending to the White House if their funding is suddenly in question? What is the administration's goal here in your judgment?
Well, I actually think it has some parallels to what Matt's been talking about in terms of the deportations, which is it is this sort of signaling to his base. And he's been picking targets that he's pretty confident his base isn't going to care about. I mean, most of the sort of hardcore MAGA Republicans have been very sympathetic to the administration's points about Abrego Garcia. They believe the tweets that the administration has been putting out that he is part of MS-16 and therefore should be deported. And I think you see sort of a similar thing with the universities. It's very hard for Americans to feel a lot of compassion, for Harvard and for elite institutions that have billions of dollars in endowment. But that doesn't mean it's not dangerous and a terrible precedent. I think we saw a similar thing with the law firms that Trump, compelled a number of very high-profile law firms to sort of bend to his will to start offering hundreds of millions of dollars in free legal services to get away from, his threats of going after lawyers and the firms. And he's doing the same thing with the universities. Harvard has pushed back and they have the financial resources to do it. And I think we're going to see other universities emboldened to do the same thing. But it's basically all part of the same strategy, which is go after institutions, people, organizations that Trump is confident his own base is not going to care about in order to sort of flex his muscle and prove somehow that he's accomplishing his agenda. Even though obviously, we all appreciate the incredible challenges and problems that it poses for Americans, for institutions, for research, et cetera.
All right, Matt Dowd and Lauren Leder, thank you both for being on